Today is Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. Will there be a ceasefire in Gaza? We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. Email us as well, right to our inbox, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. We're getting through the news of the Cray together each and every weekday, bright and early. Joining me today, CBN's Billy Hallowell. And we got a lot to get to, as we always do, including on the focus story. CNN, a major news outlet here, tried to take on the topic of prophecy, and it's not going over so well.
No, we've got some people in the Christian realm who think that they did a pretty bad job of vetting the topic. We're going to talk about what Todd Hampson had to say in response to CNN.
All right, looking forward to the details there. Coming up on the main thing, X has a massive problem here with child abuse content that's going online, disturbing stuff. Trey's got the details on that coming up on the main thing. All right, make sure you subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts. We got a bunch of them. Newsmakers, Faith and Culture, Navigating Trump 2.0, Heaven Meets Earth. You can find the links to all these great podcasts right in the description of this podcast episode. Make sure you're checking all of those out. We'd greatly appreciate it. All right, we're going to head now to the news in 90 seconds. President Trump's sweeping domestic agenda just squeaked through the Senate, but the fight's not over yet. Senate Republicans narrowly approved the massive bill, which has been dubbed the Big Beautiful Bill, with a dramatic 50-50 split. Vice President Vance stepped in to break the tie. Now all eyes turn to the House, where Republicans are pushing hard to get the final approval before the July 4th holiday coming up on Friday. The outcome will decide whether Trump's top domestic priorities make it to his desk or stall in Congress. And President Trump is ramping up pressure for a quick ceasefire in Gaza, but Israel says it won't budge until Hamas surrenders and frees all hostages. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is heading to Washington next week to meet with President Trump at the White House, with Iran and Gaza topping the agenda. Trump wants the Gaza conflict wrapped up in days, but Hamas still refuses to disarm or release hostages, including 2 Americans. Israel and Syria are in daily talks to end decades of hostilities, but the Golan Heights remain a major sticking point. And yesterday was the annual payday that's become a baseball legend. Bobby Bonilla hasn't swung a bat in decades, but every July 1st, he still cashes in. It's called Bobby Bonilla Day, and he gets nearly $1.2 million from the Mets, a deal that continues until 2035. He hasn't played, Billy, since 1999 for the New York Mets, and he's been getting this. They deferred the payments. It's pretty wild.
Where's mine, Dan? Where's my deal?
Somebody, I mean, let's just think of deferred payments and all of our contracts throughout the working world. I mean, it's just amazing when you think about it, because the whole story is wild. I don't know if you've seen it, but it comes up every July 1st. And every time I see the details, I'm reminded of how crazy it is. So back in 99, the Mets, they bought him out for like $6 million, but they had 8% interest tacked in on this, but they deferred the buyout. They didn't pay the $6 million then. So instead of just paying the $6 million, they are going to owe him a total of almost $30 million, because they started paying in 2011. But the reason why they did this is incredible. They were invested in a fund that they thought was going to give them, millions and millions of dollars. It was a Bernie Madoff fund. This is the Mets. They were in a Bernie Madoff fund, and they thought, oh, we're going to be getting double-digit returns on this, so we'll defer it, make the money, then use that money to pay it off. They were a tad wrong on that one, and now they're paying him $30 million instead of $6 million. Pretty crazy story, but
that's insane.
It is insane. And Shohei Ohtani, by the way, who's like the biggest thing in baseball right now, he signed a massive contract with the Dodgers. They're only paying him, it's a $700 million contract, but they're only paying him $2 million a year now. Starting in 35 or 34 or something like that, they're going to have to pay him $68 million a year for about 10 years or so.
It's like monopoly money.
It is. It's like, and now they're deferring it. That would be, I mean, imagine that in like 15 years, like, oh, that's right. Oh, that's 68 million. Oops. That's going to be a tough year for them, I think. Fun times now for them, but going to be tough later. But anyway, I digress. Let's head on over to the focus story now. And a head-turning CNN analysis warning that prophecy, not politics, may also shape America's clash with Iran. It was published this week. So tell me about this one.
Yeah, this is an interesting article. It's an analysis piece. So it's not labeled as an opinion piece, but it's analysis. And so the entire thing essentially provides a warning of sorts that, evangelicals, Christians who believe in certain end times theologies, the rapture, that Israel needs to be back on the map again before Jesus's return, that all of these things could be impacting the decision to even bomb Iran that we recently engaged in as a country. And so, yeah, look, the article tackles, again, everything from the rapture to different positions on Israel. And it really has struck some people, particularly those who hold those views, as strange and incomplete, even leading, because in this article, you only have people critical of these ideas. You don't have anybody in the article at all who was interviewed who says, look, I believe in the rapture, or hey, I believe that Israel's a fulfillment. Here's why. Let me explain to you why. There's no analysis that provides any sort of perspective on that end. It's sort of like, here's the boogeyman, that's what it feels like, at least, whether that was the intent or not. Here's the boogeyman that you should be worried about that could be influencing the way that we handle the Middle East as a country. And so, that has sparked some attention. And obviously, we went out to get a response from prophecy expert Todd Hampson, who is well known in this space and does hold those views. So it was interesting to hear his perspective.
Yeah, and how is Todd reacting to this piece? And this isn't the only thing I've seen from this perspective, right? This critique. It's also coming from the right as well. So not just CNN, who we'd often criticize as not being particularly in tune with the Christian worldview. There are some Christians with this view too, and that sentiment is growing. But how is Todd reacting to all this?
Yeah, I know there's a big debate over all of these things, right? The rapture in particular. But Todd basically said he thought it was a very caricatured view of biblical Christianity. He said it's just not fair, not balanced, not accurate, and not journalism. And the title, just so people understand, of this CNN article is "Prophecy, Not Politics, May Also Shape America's Clash with Iran." And so, he felt it made a number of arguments that didn't have the full picture, the full story, that, they were not presenting what they should have really been presenting, which was both sides of this argument. You can claim that, hey, and I do find it interesting, right? Some people in the same circle, you might assume, might say, oh, well, Trump is not a real Christian. He's not religious. He doesn't care. But then on the same token, it's like suddenly the argument is, well, this end times theology might be driving Trump's decisions. It's like, well, which is it?
Right.
Right. And I don't know. I don't know which it is. I don't know people's hearts. But my point is, it's an interesting argument. Now, is it possible that end times theology can shape the way we see the world, the way we see things happening? Absolutely. But Todd's point also was that really Iran has an end times theology that is shaping the way they're behaving, not so much Christians in America.
And what argument does the article make about the rapture? What's it say there?
Yeah, so this is interesting. Let me read you part of the article, and this is written by CNN's John Blake. It says, most mainstream biblical scholars say the word rapture does not appear in most translations of the Bible or the book of Revelation. Many mainstream biblical scholars say the book of Revelation does not depict the literal end of the world. It's an anti-Roman tract that used coded language to tell Christians that God would destroy Rome's evil empire. So this is the position, obviously, that is being taken in this. It's interesting because the word rapture doesn't appear in most translations of the Bible. But as Todd Hampson noted, well, first of all, he said, look, these arguments have been blown out of the water. He said they're not factual. They didn't do the research. He said technically the word rapture is not in the original Greek, but the word harpazo is. And he said that word means a violent or quick snatching away, a removal from something. He said it has other meanings as well, and that word is used in scripture several times. He said, and that word in the Latin was translated to rupturo. And then that's where we get the word rapture. But again, there's debate about the rapture. Not everybody believes it in the Christian realm, right? Or they believe in, pre, mid, post. There's all different ideas about when the rapture might even happen if you do believe in it. But here's the thing, and this is an important point here. The word Trinity is also not in the Bible. Does that mean you reject the idea of a Trinity? The word Bible is not in the Bible. Do we reject the Bible? So, a lot of times a word is describing a concept that is seen in Scripture. So the rapture among some is seen in Scripture, right? So anyway, just an important point.
No, that's the first thing that was coming to my mind, and what I was going to say exactly as well. I guess they don't believe in the Trinity either, then, because the Trinity is not mentioned in Scripture. But when you read Scripture, and it clearly teaches that, and so that's why most Christians believe in the Trinity. Yeah, it's an argument from sort of absence, sort of like saying, well, the Bible doesn't really address, I'm trying to think of one of the ones that they've said before, like transgenderism. It doesn't address it. It's like, well, that doesn't mean it doesn't say anything about it. You can look at the design for the family and how God has made us male and female. He made us, and then the design for marriage. All of that is clearly laid out. So the word doesn't have to be in there for it to be addressed. So it's a frustrating thing when you see that. And I expect nothing less from CNN, but you would expect them, though, to have reached out to maybe some more people on the other side of things instead of just trying to straw man it, essentially, what their best guess the other side would say is.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing, right? I think it's fine to write an article asking these questions. Questions are a good thing. We shouldn't be afraid of questions. But I think the idea that, that this should be something that is presented with no other perspective that actually puts it in context. Because there were things, the word Ezekiel is never mentioned anywhere in here. If you're going to talk about Israel, how do you not talk about the prophecies in Ezekiel, right? These are things you have to at least be fair and say, this is where people are getting it from. He mentions Genesis, and that's sort of it. I mean, there's not any other. So yeah, it's not well constructed. Let's put it that way.
Let's, before we go on this, where do you think this debate's going to go, Billy? Is this sort of like a blip on the radar? Like I mentioned, I do see some circles in Christian circles, or at least self-identifying Christian circles, talking similar sentiments about Israel, about the end times, and about America's involvement in that. Where do you see this debate going? Do you think that this will be fizzling out, or do you think this is going to grow?
I think it's going to grow because the Middle East is chaotic, right? You have that chaos in the Middle East, and you have now merging this political, ideology that is essentially saying, well, we shouldn't get involved in any wars whatsoever. We should be isolationists, right? That's happening. And so these things feel like they're converging. Well, we don't need to support Israel. It's not the same Israel as 1948 Israel is not the same as biblical Israel. So I think you're going to see more infighting among Christians on this in particular. The secular world already thinks what they think, right? Now this is becoming a Christian, unfortunately, Christian versus Christian on what they actually believe the Bible is saying here. And so, but look, it goes into much deeper issues, right? What do you believe about eschatology? What do you believe about God's promises to mankind? I mean, these are actually very big theological issues, ironically, that the crisis in the Middle East is sparking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, interesting food for thought, and we will certainly be keeping an eye on it going forward if this does indeed continue to brew and continue to grow. So appreciate you breaking it down on the podcast today, Billy. And we're going to head to the main thing now. And X, does it have a problem with sickening illegal content? Well, Trey talked about the issue with Haley McNamara about what's happening on the platform and how it is or should be addressing the problem. That conversation's today's main thing.
There's a new report that says that CSAM, a child sexual abuse material, also known as child pornography, is continuing to grow rampantly on X. So talk about that issue for people who might not even be aware that that is such a huge problem right now.
Yeah, so unfortunately, it really is a significant problem. It's a problem on really all online platforms, but on X, formerly Twitter, it seems worse, at least worse potentially than ever before on X. So there is this trend where there are many hashtags on Twitter, on X, that are associated with the sharing of child sexual abuse material or child pornography. And this has been a long-standing problem. I myself have seen it. And unfortunately, it seems to be getting worse. That's what this NBC News report says, that there are certain hashtags that they've been tracking where now it seems like there are more and more posts on these hashtags, sometimes even posting several times a minute of sharing child sexual abuse material. And what's really concerning about this is obviously we know that the sharing of CSAM happens on the dark web, but it's happening in open spaces publicly. The hashtags are very public. And very often I myself have even seen individuals trying to tag Twitter support or X support, asking for them to address the fact that these are very public, shareable ways of sharing this illegal content and this abuse content. So it's very concerning that the problem seems to be getting worse and not better.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like X is just on the cusp of really becoming nothing more than a pornography platform. I mean, because I'm thinking about this law in Texas that was just upheld by the Supreme Court that says you have to have age verification systems put in place to access a pornography website in certain states, Texas, of course, being one of them. Virginia has similar laws, as well as Utah and a handful of others. I mean, are we to a place now where a site like X ought to have an age verification requirement to go on, because predators are getting, as you said, especially with hashtags, are getting better and better at sharing this content online?
Yeah, it is a problem, and especially because X intentionally allows the sharing of pornographic content, then they become a hub for it because people can post there, and X is not doing anything to verify the age, consent, or identity of the people in pornographic videos on their platform. So it's a huge problem because it's not only children, child sexual abuse material, but also revenge pornography, AI deep fakes, so many different kinds of what we call adult image-based sexual abuse or non-consensual sharing of images is happening on this platform. So yeah, I think at this point, if X wants to act like it's a pornography website and allow this kind of thing, then they should be regulated that same way.
Well, unfortunately, when Elon Musk purchased Twitter, he said that eliminating CSAM was a top priority. And then last year, even, it was in the spring, he said that X cares and does more about child safety than any other social media platform on the internet. What do you make of those claims when we're here talking about this issue in June of July almost of 2025?
A lot of these social media companies will say the right thing, and even their policies on paper will look strong on the front end. They'll say we have no tolerance for this abusive behavior, but then they do tolerate it in practice. So that's just what we're seeing is they can say the right things, but their actions aren't backing it up. I mean, some of these hashtags that were discussed in the NBC interview have been identified as being associated with CSAM since 2023. And they are still not only active, but still being actively used for the spreading of child sexual abuse material to this day. I would also argue that it doesn't seem like child safety is really X's top priority because they have started rolling out encrypted direct messaging on their platform, which is very similar to WhatsApp, which of course has become a haven of CSAM and sextortion and other kinds of, sex trafficking, networking, and grooming as well. And we see that that's very typical for encrypted direct messaging systems. And X is kind of opening up a whole new door for ways that predators can interact on their platform and not even fixing the existing problems that are already happening.
All right, appreciate that conversation there. And that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing. We're going to take a look at James 4:17, which reads, "Remember, it is sin to know what you ought to do and then not do it." Just a reminder that sometimes inaction is sin as well.
Oh, yeah, that's actually convicting. It's so simple. It's such a simple message, but it's like, oh, yeah, that's true. And, we ought to, when we know what's right, we ought to cling to that. And again, these simple reminders that can help keep us on track.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that's where we are going to leave it on this edition of the Quick Start Podcast. As always, make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. Get there each and every day. We'd appreciate that. You can check out the CBN News YouTube channel as well. All right, Lord willing, that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back here tomorrow with more. God bless. We'll see you then.